I decided to go to medical school because I think health is this really cool place where social sciences and biological sciences and social justice all kind of collide. I've loved the people I've met. I'm so grateful for the kind of people that are attracted to UVM and the kind of people I've met, not only in our original class, but then taking a year and being in the next class and just being so amazed again by this other batch of 100 plus humans that are so cool. People, relationships, but then also just content. It's finally getting through all of that school and getting to learn the things that make your brain just light up, and you are just so curious and so excited to learn this stuff and then turn around and not just learn it but put it into action. So what made my story unique in terms of the medical school experience? The one-liner is I am status post 3 craniotomies for an intracranial epidermoid. It was something that was diagnosed a long time ago. I had a really bad concussion in undergrad, and part of that workup was surprise you have mass in your brain, but it's on CT, so we don't know what it is. Like, good luck on your orgo exam. And once I'd gotten into medical school, I was out in Los Angeles finishing up some grad work, getting ready to move back to UVM. It was all happening. I was so excited, and I started to have this nerve pain, this trigeminal nerve pain. And I came back to do my yearly MRI at Christmas, and we'd fallen off the wagon for some reason. I hadn't done it in 2 years, and they were like, well, there's actually some small incremental growth in this very, very slow growing tumor. It's really pushing on some things that it can't push on. We're worried about your eyesight, we're worried about your hearing, we're worried about the angle your brainstem is getting pushed into. I completely underestimated the neurocognitive effects it would have. And that's been a whole evolving realization and story. So medical school itself, those first 2 clinical years, I felt really still really labile. I remember crying in Dr. Black's arms. I was really still very labile emotionally, for someone who prided themselves on being kind of stoic for a while. The fact that I was just crying at everything and then couldn't stop crying was just so, it was really embarrassing to meet these people and be like, I'm sorry, I'm really not like this, I swear. And at the time I was like, it's fine, it's good enough, I'm passing. And it wasn't bad enough that I wanted to not be there. Being there was more important than anything. So first 2 years in med school, I felt like I was just very apart from a lot of our class. I would get home from school, and the times when I later found out that other people were going back to the anatomy lab and really drilling, they were reviewing stuff, I was going home and laying on the couch and trying to sleep but not being able to sleep. So that was really frustrating, to not feel like I could even get that sleep to consolidate any of that information I was learning, to really kind of recharge my emotional battery, and was having just such bad migraines. I love that there was so much attention towards just atypical learners, and as someone with attention deficit, that had always existed, and of course just got even worse when you start poking the brain. I appreciated that, but the reality was going into a lab room full of people I loved and cared about, but oh my gosh, what a loud, opinionated group, and that was just so overstimulating. So I felt a lot of guilt and shame around how inconsistent my performance was, how I felt really unreliable, all these things that you think of make someone, quote, professional and make them, prepare them to be a good physician. So then we arrive at neuro after NMGI, felt pretty good, and had this terrible depressive episode starting kind of that spring. Wasn't sleeping, and it felt like no matter how much I studied, how much I rallied to get to the lab or to get up and go study, which anyone who's had depression knows that if you have those neurovegetative kind of components to it, just getting out the door is the battle of the day. So even if I managed to do that, I felt like whenever I sat down to really try and get through that work, it felt like nothing was going in. And I remember reaching out and being like, I'm not prepared for this test. I'm not going to do well on this test. I feel like I'm really struggling. And when I brought this to the attention of deans and faculty kind of throughout the year, the overarching theme was oh, have a tutor. you're doing fine, you're passing, it's okay, which is kind of a big theme for attention deficit, especially in attentive type, is like, you were really good at masking. You're just high enough performing that I didn't get diagnosed actually until I was like 26. So it was kind of in that spirit. I anticipated having a harder time as we went on. I'm sure that OMSE gets a lot of really anxious med students, and we're all convinced we're gonna fail at any moment, and that's just kind of how we're wired. So I think when someone has a genuine concern, it's not crying wolf, and I wish there were a better way to kind of, for them, for their sake and for ours, to kind of differentiate when someone is very sincerely and accurately reading the situation and reading themselves and anticipating their needs. I did feel like in individual conversations I was really supported, with individual professors I was really supported, but kind of the overarching, the kind of macro structure of how our curriculum was, I just felt like it wasn't working well for me, and I didn't have the like bandwidth to really kind of throw myself into active learning. I have attention deficit. Organization, not my thing. I do not clean well, I do not organize well, time things well. So the prospect of packing up your life and moving every 6 weeks, as well as taking an exam, was okay at first, and then very quickly got to be more than I could handle. I dreaded that patient tracker so much. I have learned through clerkship that those patient trackers, that kind of stuff, that's hard for me. And I am so scared that now that my brain is even functioning even lower than baseline, that these things are just gonna slip by. I'm not gonna get the things done I need to get done, and I'm scared. And so the support through since last procedure has been so wonderful, and people have been so patient with me about things being late or having to ask more than once for just silly stuff, signing this, responding to that, all those things that get lost in the shuffle a lot for me. And I'd always, again, that kind of internalized guilt of like, I'm the delinquent med student that hasn't responded to Jacqueline's email. I felt like saying like I had neurosurgery in June was way more concrete and tangible than I had neurosurgery before my first year of med school and you even met me. So it was in some ways it was easier to be transparent about it and for people to understand the link between how I was existing and functioning and kind of the underlying pathology. That was easier, and I felt less guilt and weirdness about letting people know. Part of me was like, this will get better, we've done this before, but the other part of you is like, what if it doesn't? What if this is how you are now? And that's like the scariest part of all of it. So the whole time I just felt like my mid-rotation feedback was, you are so far below your peers, like what's going on? And me being like, I'm so sorry, like I'm more frustrated than you and I don't know how to make this better. I hated that something I was so sure I wanted to do was suddenly like so miserable and being in so much physical pain and not feeling like people understood but were still kind of resentful. So surgery was really when I felt like it was really culminating into affecting my performance, presenting was always this really terrifying thing for me. If I couldn't write it down first, I would just be so disorganized, and there's no better way to piss off a chief resident than having a poor presentation that's taking too long. The interview process, I did not get enough raw numbers. I had in the end 3 OB-GYN interviews and only had 1 interview at Sutter Santa Rosa for family med. So like not enough, but every interview I did, I was like, this felt like it went really well, and had people being like, we want you here, like, are you gonna rank us? And like very, like getting really this kind of mutual great feeling about these conversations I was having. So it was weird to feel like I don't have enough, this is not going to go well, and also getting that positive feedback and feeling so good about the individual interviews, and ended up through this process being kind of in touch with my advisors and them saying like, let's make a plan for match week, like scramble, like maybe you should be thinking about, you know, some prelim gen surge positions. And I'm in my mind saying like, oh my God, that would be the most miserable year of my life. And like, not only is it not what I want to do, like to get back to OB-GYN from that, it just, I was like, that just, I'm all for like the path less traveled, but like that physically does not sound like doable for me. And it doesn't sound, I was just really worried it would completely break me. And through this application process, basically like the advice I got from OB-GYN was like, you are not allowed to say the words brain surgery in any of your interviews. Like in my like mock interview, the question I got was, what's the hardest thing you've ever done? And I was like, dude, brain surgery, coming back from brain surgery twice. And I was like, that is 100% the hardest thing, and the thing I think about most, and the thing I'm also most proud of. And afterwards, the debrief was like, you cannot go there. Like, even if it's a compelling story, even if you think it's gonna make you a better doc, and we think it's gonna make you a better doc, but like, you don't want to give any of these people a reason to take you off their list. And actually the one interview when it came out for real and all of its gritty detail was in my Brown interview at the Warwick site, where I was talking with this great old kind of Jewish physician who's like what you think of when you think of an old family doc. And I forget how it came up, I think by way of like, oh, you play fiddle. And I was like, well, I started playing fiddle to kind of rehab my hands and have something to like bring me joy when I was on this journey. And I was like, I actually played it because of this neurosurgery I had. And we got into it and how it has figured in my whole journey and how I came to Family Med. And his response was like, well, it's so lucky that, you know, we're just so close to Boston. So if you ever need another one, we're so close to your neurosurgeon. And I was just like, that is the response I wanted to hear this whole time, was just like, oh, well, like, okay, it's not perfect, but it's fine. And like, here's how we're gonna deal with it. And that is the program I matched at, which is really crazy to think about. Trusting my understanding of myself and who I've become as a physician, and also trusting kind of the read of the conversation and owning it was, I mean, if we judge the match as telling us what worked, then like, yes, was being me was what worked. I hope that we're more open about it, because figuring out on your own takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and it would just be so nice if there were some blueprints out there and accessible to everyone about going through this, not in the perfect, typical way, but the messy way that still gets you where you need to go.